All right, we got a front row seat to Chris Carter. He's going to talk about Pittsburgh and Dallas making a trade for George Pickens. We'll do that today here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
There's no doubt about the fact that it is your team every day, and we appreciate you making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On NFL podcast, and it's Thursday, so I have Chris Carter at Carter Critiques and from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and Locked On Steelers here to run it down today. You know, we do it like this each and every day, man, and you know it's free to subscribe to, and wherever you get your podcast, make sure you tap in so you do not miss us at that location. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Shout out to the everydayers that join us. Here's where we're going. Where we're going to end up. The Jets. Are they a Lions clone? What does that mean? How does a plane? Never mind. Anyway, the New York Jets are a Lions clone the way they're organizationally structured and maybe the way they want to play. We'll discuss that. A giant endorsement at quarterback for Jackson Dart. Doesn't mean a whole bunch because it's coming from college, but it's still an endorsement nonetheless. But at the top, Dak Prescott has no excuses. Why would I say that, Chris Carter? Why would I say Dak Prescott has zero excuses to get that offense going in Dallas? Do you have any idea why I said that?
Could it be because now he has CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens as his top two wide receivers?
It could. And I'm going to get your opinion on George Pickens not being in Pittsburgh and how that all happened. But first, let us rejoice with the people who actually did get something in this trade, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. Landon McCool and Marcus Mosher, as always, have their reaction.
We heard some rumblings late last night. The Cowboys were potentially making a deal for a number 2 receiver. They got one today. George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a 24-year-old receiver. The Cowboys gave up a 2026 third-round pick and a fifth-round pick in exchange for Pickens and a sixth-round pick. We'll discuss the trade. We'll get all into that in a second. But the player, what do we know about George Pickens?
Man, I think if you looked at all the guys that we had discussed, right, as potential folks to come in here, via trade, via signing, maybe even including the guys in the draft as well, that could, on the field, give you the greatest increase at wide receiver 2, I think George Pickens was the top guy.
I think he was the top guy, too, that wasn't under contract with anybody else. He is going to be an X receiver there. And a lot of people, when they think about the X receiver, which is the guy that plays on the opposite side of the tight end and he plays on the line of scrimmage, they think the number 1 receiver. We hear it all the time. CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 receiver in Dallas. They're just going to move him around a little bit, but George Pickens will provide that X that'll give you that deep threat to hopefully loosen some things up for CeeDee. Now that I have gotten to the point of I have told them how this benefits Dallas. Trade sometimes benefit both teams. Sometimes one team is mad and the other one isn't. I want to get to the Pittsburgh Steelers side of it. They're losing a lot. If we're going to say that Dallas is gaining a lot, the Pittsburgh Steelers are losing a lot. Chris Carter, you got about 5 minutes to tell us everything you can about this trade and the ramifications it has for the Steelers.
So there's no doubt that the Steelers are not a better team at this very point in time without George Pickens. They added DK Metcalf via trade during the offseason, and there was a lot of excitement. We even coined the phrase the weapons of past destruction, because we thought that these two guys together could be explosive and dangerous. But the thing was that we were wondering, would they trade George Pickens? Because it would be unlike the Steelers to pay 2 receivers big money contracts at the same time. It's just something that they haven't done. And with DK Metcalf's contract, that's big money. And George Pickens is on the last year of his rookie deal. So he'd either do a franchise tag or a big money contract. And there were a lot of things about George Pickens that were questioned about if he should be that guy. And a lot of it came from his attitude. He didn't block for his teammates. He didn't run hard routes when he knew he wasn't getting targeted. He showed up late to the Christmas Day game against the Chiefs this year. And then at the end of that game, he could be seen crashing out on the field, yelling at people and having to be restrained and, kind of giving people a hard time. And so, I looked back at that and I thought that, like, hey, I could see before the draft them trading George Pickens. I could see them during the draft trading George Pickens. Once they got through the draft, I was like, okay, well, I guess they're not moving on from him. But it turns out what we're hearing is that it wasn't that they weren't trying to move him before the draft. It was that they were waiting for the right price, and the highest pick that they were getting for him was a 4th before the draft, and now they're able to get a 3rd for him, and that to them was the right price. Because if they had let George Pickens play throughout this year, and he would have been and they didn't sign him, they'd get back a 3rd round comp pick for him, because I imagine someone would pay him top dollars to be a wide receiver somewhere in free agency, and you'd probably get a 3rd round comp pick, but that's a later 3rd round pick, and that would be in 2027. Whereas now they get that 3rd round pick in 2026. It's an actual 3rd round pick, not a comp pick, and that's going to help them in their pursuit of a quarterback in this 2026 NFL draft class that we've been breaking down on Locked On Steelers. That's their ultimate goal. They think that next year is the year to go trade up and get a quarterback. They want the resources to do so. Now they're estimated to have 3 third-round picks with their pick, the Cowboys pick, and the comp pick they're getting back from this past year, Dan Moore being signed by the Titans by big money. So you have a 1st-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, 3 thirds, 12 overall picks in that draft class now. That's a good place for the Steelers to be sitting there to trade up. But the question will be, because people are like, okay, well, what about George Pickens not being there? Why did they get rid of him? I think they're cleansing the room a little bit. They're trying to get things across where they're trying to say, hey, you know what? We want guys that are team first. We want guys that are less me and more we. And I thought Ryan Clark brought up this point very well on Get Up the other day, and he said Mike Tomlin is a quote. Mike Tomlin consistently says he doesn't run from coaching. If George Pickens, with that immense amount of talent, can no longer exist in that locker room, it's going to be difficult for him to exist anywhere. And that, to me, Wig, is the biggest question, because the Steelers have been the masters of dumping wide receivers at the exact right time. I posted this on my Twitter account. Looking back at all the big wide receiver trades during the Mike Tomlin era. San Antonio Holmes back in 2010, they gave up a 5th rounder for him. People thought they were crazy. He was 2 years removed from being Super Bowl MVP. Turned out he was flaming out. He was pretty good the next year, but flamed out shortly after that. Martavis Bryant in 2018 for a 3rd round pick. People thought they were crazy. He didn't even last a year with the Raiders. The biggest one, Antonio Brown, 2019, they got a 3rd and a 5th. People were like, that's stupid. The Raiders fleeced them. He never even got to training camp with the Raiders. Then Chase Claypool, 2023, they got the 1st overall pick of the 2nd round off the Bears for Chase Claypool. He didn't last more than a season. They absolutely fleeced the Bears. Deontay Johnson, another pick that they thought that, oh, wow, you're giving up the best route runner in football, a guy that's been so good for you in 2024 for Dante Jackson, a veteran cornerback, and a pick swap. And it turned out Dante Jackson at least started the whole year for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson is always on his 3rd team since that trade last year. And now you have George Pickens getting him for a 3rd rounder and a swap. And a friend of mine, Jeffrey Benedict, put it this way. He said, when you look at the combined trades of Antonio Brown, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Martavis Bryant, the Steelers from those trades got a 2nd round pick, 2 third-round picks, a 5th round pick, upgraded a 7th round pick to a 6th round pick, and got Dante Jackson for 2024. Those teams combined got 814 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Doubt the Steelers have had a history of dumping their receivers at the exact right time before they fold. And the question was, when would the NFL say enough is enough? We're not buying it anymore. Well, apparently the Cowboys are saying we're taking a bite at that apple, because George Pickens he could be different.
Yeah.
Or he could be the same issue.
It could be. There's one guy that's missing. I don't know how he was let go. Plexico Burress caught a game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. That's about the only person I can think about that Pittsburgh had.
Emmanuel Sanders, I think, is the big one.
He did.
Both Burress and Sanders and Juju Smith-Schuster, because he also won a Super Bowl. It's funny, all 3 of them won, but they were not traded. They were allowed to hit free agency, because it was just, hey, with Plaxico Burress, they were paying Hines Ward at the time, and they were like, we got to pay that guy because he's the much better wide receiver. Hines Ward went on to win 2 Super Bowls with the Steelers, be a Super Bowl MVP. Emmanuel Sanders was let go because they got to pay Antonio Brown.
Correct.
Was the best receiver in football. Juju Smith-Schuster was let go because I think he got injured, and it was kind of like, obviously he can't be the same 1,400-yard receiver that he was for the Steelers moving forward. And he wasn't. He was just he was part of a better offensive machine because it had Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs. So I think those three instances are instances where the receivers blossomed somewhere else and were fine. But again, they were not traded. They were allowed to just hit free agency. They signed with other teams and they kept going that way. These were guys the Steelers forcibly removed from their organization because they said, we can't work with this anymore.
And it would be buyer beware for me that if the Steelers trade you something shiny and pretty, no matter how it looks. Chris just gave you an example of how it's going to end up working out, and there's a long track record in the history. Dallas doesn't have any expectations for him being a superstar. They just need him to help. I don't know if George Pickens considers himself a helpmate. George Pickens is the dude that wants to be out front, especially since what he does this year is going to affect how much money he gets for the next year, and that's the generational part of his earning potential. Not, as a second-round pick. It's as a dude who can hit free agency and get $100 million in free agency. We'll see if it happens for him. We got some other stuff to talk about here. A giant endorsement for a quarterback that's headed to New York. We'll get to that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Listen, man, there's nothing like the atmosphere of the NBA playoffs. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it easy and fast to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Game Time: because of the priority that they have on last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're off and running here on Locked On NFL on a Thursday. I am with Chris Carter of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and, of course, Locked On Steelers. We just got through talking about George Pickens leaving Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has some other issues, like who's going to be throwing the ball, because the guy that was throwing the ball there last year is now in New York. And the Giants still probably have issues of who's going to be throwing the ball. Russell Wilson's probably going to start for the Giants, but they did use a first-round pick that they traded back up for in the first round to take Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. That's a move, Chris, that a lot of people thought Pittsburgh would do something like that, except they didn't have a second rounder because of DK Metcalf. But a lot of people thought Pittsburgh was going to come up and be in that secondary market for a quarterback. But you just mentioned they're probably looking towards doing that next season.
It's because I don't think they liked this quarterback class, and personally, I don't like Jackson Dart. I think the Giants bit into a bad apple there. I could be wrong, but like, hey, you know what? John Gruden's out here telling people that Will Howard, the Steelers' 6th-round quarterback, is the next Josh Allen, and I'm just trying to help Steelers fans understand, guys. Don't do this to yourselves. Just please. And I'm in the same boat with Jackson Dart. Like, honestly, I was not that big on Dart this year, or Shedeur Sanders. That's why I said back in like February, I'm like, the Steelers are waiting for the 2026 draft class. They will take a D tackle in the first round. They'll probably get a running back. That was their first 2 picks. They'll take a quarterback on day 3, which they did, and they'll trade up next year for that guy if that guy is there, because it's still not a guarantee that the quarterback is there, but they're willing to wait and spin on that chance than to try to force a quarterback that they don't like to be their franchise guy moving forward.
Well, we're all witnesses. You said that here, that you didn't like any of the quarterbacks. But if I was Jackson Dart, I want somebody to love me the way Lane Kiffin loves Jackson Dart. And Patricia Traynor posted on a Locked On Giants page some remarks from Lane Kiffin or talking about Jackson Dart and what he feels about him. Check this out.
Well, that's really 4 years of playing. Sometimes these guys don't play very much because they come out early, and maybe they're only had a year or two of starting. So 3 years starting here, started a couple games as a freshman at USC. So he's been in a lot of games, a lot of big games here the last few years, and performed really well. He's had some really good coaching with Charlie Weiss Jr. as his coordinator, and now Joe Judge, as his quarterback coach this last year. So I think that really helps players with the jump, comparable to sometimes they're just in a college system and then the NFL coaching kind of blows them away. So I think those things are in his benefit a lot. Plus he's off the charts in preparation and will soak it in, and we'll have a great relationship with the coaches and players.
Now, wait a minute. When somebody starts, I said I want somebody to love me the way Lane Kiffin loves Jackson Dart. Well, hold on. If somebody asks you about me and you start talking about the process and who coached me and how much experience I have and how many games, you still ain't told me a whole bunch. All you told me is that I'm a system dude who will get in line and do everything that y'all tell me to do and be prepared and get there. What about his ability? What did he do? How did he play on the field? Did he throw the ball well? Chris, it sounds like somebody describing their son who they really want to get this job, but then they know that once you hire him, you stuck with him.
I think that's the thing here, is that Jackson Dart appears to be a coachable quarterback, and that is a quality that you like. He could be a floor raiser. He is not a ceiling raiser, which is what you need first-round quarterbacks to be. It's why I wasn't in on him, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, or Shedeur Sanders. Any of this quarterback class, to me, outside of Cam Ward, all these guys were, hey, you know what? We could play to a system and play it well enough that we won't let you down. But we are not going to be the factors that make you a Super Bowl champion team. We can be part of we can be the passenger on your train, but don't ask us to be the conductor that makes it all happen in the NFL. And I think sometimes people get caught up in the differences between college talent and pro talent. Like I argue with Steelers fans right now. Well, Howard just won the national championship. What do you mean he can't do it at the NFL? That don't mean nothing. Quinn Ewers was one of the best college quarterbacks in all of college football.
Stetson Bennett did it twice.
Exactly. And do you see him lighting it up in the NFL? No. The Steelers, the last time the Steelers drafted a national champion quarterback, his name was T. Martin. He was a good quarterback for Tennessee. But you know they passed over for him for? Tom Brady. And so that's and again, Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick, stab in the dark. No one saw that coming. But there's certain traits that you look for, and that those traits can be right and wrong as far as how they'll project out. But the NFL teams are gambling on these players just like you're gambling on these players when you're literally gambling. So, but they have access to information and traits and background notes and things like that can form their opinions much more, I think, completely than what we had, even what you and I have as journalists who cover this sport. So with that, that's where I think that there's a difference there as far as how these things operate. And listen, Lane Kiffin, he's going to sell his guy. Like, I cover Pat Narduzzi. Pat Narduzzi is a Kenny Pickett ride or die person. Even though Kenny Pickett is on his 3rd team in the NFL, Pat Narduzzi will tell you, hey, give that kid a shot. He's going to win for you. And you could think whatever you want to about Kenny Pickett, but Pat Narduzzi is going to back his guy. I think that's what Lane Kiffin's doing here. He's backing his guy. He's saying, hey, he can be this guy for you, and who knows? Maybe Jackson Dart can be the guy that conducts it. In my estimations, I didn't think so. I thought the Giants reached for him. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, I'll give you an example. Gardner Minshew lit up the Pac-12 or whatever it was for 4,700 yards and almost 40 touchdowns when he played under the late great Mike Leach. Got to the Jaguars, had a couple of opportunities to play a couple of years in a row, had 37 touchdowns and 11 picks. But the Jaguars had Trevor Lawrence, right? So people are saying, look at the numbers, the dude's a starter. Since he left Jacksonville in 4 years, Gardner Minshew has 30 touchdowns and 23 interceptions. And a bunch of people realize, just like you said, he's not going to carry a team. So we just can't lose our mind over college stats, because it has about as much to do with it as watching a bunch of dudes from Santa Clara, Gonzaga, and Dayton play in the Final Four. You know what I mean? Thinking that they're going to go be NBA superstars. Just doesn't work out. It just doesn't happen that way. All right, you want to win a championship, because that's what it's all about. You got to have a bunch of different parts and keep it all together, and that's what the Eagles have done with an extension for Dallas Goedert, the tight end that they thought they weren't going to be able to keep. Here's Lou DiBiase from Locked On Eagles to let you know just how happy he is about that.
The best news I've heard in a while. The Philadelphia Eagles and tight end Dallas Goedert agreed to a restructured contract today, keeping him as an Eagle in 2025. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Eagles could not afford to lose Goedert this season, even if he's only a one-year rental player. That is far more valuable in a Super Bowl contending window than any late round pick they would have got back in a trade. It did sound like they had offers during the NFL draft, but the Eagles wanted to keep Goedert on a restructured deal. And Dallas Goedert, it sounds like, according to Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, selflessly restructured. I wonder if he took a pay cut. If he did, I'm sure the Eagles did add some guaranteed money. There were no guarantees left on that deal, but he was so good in that playoff run. Third downs over the middle of the field. The Eagles need Dallas Goedert, and I'm so glad he's back for 2025.
I'm not going overboard when I say this. The Eagles offensively are the one team, I believe, that has at least 10 guys that if you grade them on at their respective positions in the National Football League, I give them at least a B. Dallas Goedert is a B+ tight end in the National Football League. The only position Philadelphia has that I'm wondering about is right guard, because that's been the one. Like last year was Mekhi Becton for a year. It might be Kenyon Green this year, or it might be Tyler Steen. They are the one team I can tell you that has at least 10 dudes that I wouldn't give a grade any lower than a B on offense.
No, I agree with that. I think that they have a lot of guys lined up for them. It's part of what makes their offense work, is that they have a really good offensive line, a great running back, awesome wide receivers, an awesome quarterback, and you complete it with a really good tight end. And listen, this is what you do when you're an organization that you have guys that not only fit your talent level, but also fit your culture. And I think that's the other part that Dallas Goedert gets. He's physical, he's a playmaker, he's the perfect complement to what they have going on right now. So what do you do when you have good complements to what your core is, and you just won a Super Bowl? You double down. You keep those guys. You keep them in the fold, and you try to win as much as you can, because now that when you have that winning formula, you are not sure if you will ever get it again. So you better keep it, hold on to it as best you can, and get as many bites of that apple before you try to jettison guys off. And it's always good to amass talent and keep building for the future. But when you can keep guys, keep guys. And I do think it's a win that they kept Dallas Goedert.
When you draft well, you ought to feel entitled and selfish. These are our players. You do your own damn job to get your dudes. We'll give you what we want to give you. We ain't letting none of these good guys go away. And salute to Howie Roseman and the Eagles for being able to do that. All right, we're going to talk about a couple of teams that, haven't won as much as they'd like, but they hope they've turned it around. The Jets and the Falcons have different agendas. Well, same agenda, different path to get there. We'll discuss that and more here in the third and final segment of Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with the top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent is important. If you need help with the marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Making a turn down the final stretch. I sound like I'm running the Kentucky Derby. Here we are on Locked On NFL, making that turn. Going to talk about a couple of teams right now that have a little bit to prove. Usually when teams, Chris, go and get coaches from a winning organization, and you've seen it with Pittsburgh getting pilfered all these years for coaches, people just wanting some of that consistency. You expect them to do exactly what you saw happen, and that isn't that Chicago wants to be like, they want Ben Johnson to be like the Lions, and now I also believe that New York, they want Aaron Glenn to bring a little bit of that player-driven, coach-centric team to the Jets. See if Aaron Glenn can do it. He's going to start in one way, and that is with a powerful running game. Check out John Bushko of Locked On Jets to talk about that.
I think the Jets, if they're going to have a good season, they're going to have to be like one of the top 3 teams in the league in rushing. Now, the good news is I actually see the elements of a potentially dominant rushing attack here. In fact, I think there are 3 elements. I think the offensive line could be a strength in this area. And it may be more of a strength than it was a year ago. I think, if you look at what's in the backfield, there are two elements in the backfield. Can your quarterback make plays with his legs? And how good are your running backs? And I think for the Jets, all three of these elements, if they're not locks to be good, they're very promising. And there's reason for optimism in all three elements.
All right. You know a little bit about running the football there, Chris. Tell me, do the Jets have and know exactly what it is that they need to be doing to run the football game, run the football appropriately?
Well, I think they've invested in the right areas. Olu Fashanu and Amar Memba are now their last two first-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
Both guys graded highly at the top of their draft classes at the tackle position. Elijah Vera Tucker is another high pick. Joe Tippmann. So they've invested in the O-line to get there. Now they need that O-line to mature. They're much like the Steelers right now. Everyone's in that race to try to build their O-line so they can have this dominant presence up front. And they do have a talented back in Breece Hall, and now they have an athletic quarterback in Justin Fields. It is very possible for them to get there. They just got to actually put it together, because let's face it, we've thought that the Jets had it together several times now, and they've blown it every time. And it's blowing it, like, being decent of a team is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but being objectively terrible as they've been most years is just been their way. So they need Aaron Glenn to flesh that out, to get them, to inject into them what Dan Campbell did for the Lions, because I think that's one thing that Dan Campbell did for the Lions was he reset their culture, and because that's what the Lions did. They invested in their offensive line. They hit there several times, and then when you have that great O-line, then you get that really talented running back, then you get a talented receiver. Now you can work with a quarterback that's not top tier, and that's what so many teams are trying to do right now that don't have the Patrick Mahomes, the Joe Burrow, the Lamar Jackson, the Josh Allen. If you don't have that guy, you need to have a dominant line. That's what the Eagles did. Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback, but no one will put him in that top tier because he doesn't have that skill set. But it's fine because he has a very good skill set that pairs well with a physical offense. And that's what you're looking at here, that I think a lot of teams are trying to do. It's what the Niners did so well for Brock Purdy for so many years. It's what the Lions are doing right now for Jared Goff. It's what the Jets are trying to do for now for Justin Fields. It's what the Steelers are trying to do for their future quarterback that they want to pick in 2026. Everyone's trying to do that. I think the Jets are certainly on their way as far as picking it. Now they have to get it to manifest there, and that's going to be one of Aaron Glenn's top priorities this year.
Yep. I think they have a shot to do this because they're also going to get maybe 500 yards from Justin Fields as a running quarterback. And then I think by them committing to the run, it is more complementary to what was a pretty good defense until they started messing with the team last year. But they weren't playing complementary football because they couldn't keep time of possession. They couldn't score enough points because of who the quarterback was and all of the finger pointing. Mm-hmm. I think running that football, as you well know, could be the complement to a really, really good defense because it keeps them off the field and it shortens the game. And I think the Jets are a prime example of a team that needs to be doing that. And last but not least, the Atlanta Falcons, what do they need to do? The last 5 years, last team in sacks. Last 10 years, last team in sacks. Last 15 years, last team in sacks. Last 20 years, last team in sacks. So you say, why don't you just say the last 20 years? No, I want you to know that over 20 years, 15, 10, and 5, it's still the same thing. And now they think they fixed it with the defense and 2 additions, first-round additions from the Southeastern Conference at edge rusher. Check this out.
I think you're still going to keep a too high shell. I don't think that's going away in the NFL. I think this Fangio-adjacent crew is kind of that. I think that's pretty much entrenched. Where I see the multiple, and really multiple is a coach speak term. Coaches say it every time. We're going to be multiple. Everybody's multiple. What ends up happening is, what can my players actually do? How can I teach this? I think you're not going to see much of a deviation. I think you see more quarters. I think you see more cover 3, and I think you see more cover 1. I think what you're going to see a little bit is what happened with the Broncos, where you have Vance Joseph trying to run Fangio. It didn't work. What do? Let's clean it up. We can keep the 5-man front stuff. Let's play a little bit more cover 1. We're going to get back into the blitz-centric stuff that I enjoy doing as a DC. I think if Morris really lets Ulbrich call it, I think that we'll see the 5-1 stuff, but I think coverages tend to be a little bit more simpler, where we're not necessarily playing a bunch of different rotations. We're playing cover 3, we're playing cover 1, we're playing quarters, but we're changing the front structure. I think that's where that multiple part comes into play.
Doing a lot is cool, but you at least got to do one thing good, or it looks like you're just trying to do too much because you can't do one thing. And complementary football, the two biggest parts of it, in my opinion, are turnovers and third down. Can you get off the field or can you keep them on the field? The Falcons have to improve at that, Chris.
They do. They have to improve there. I think they're trying to. They have the idea for it. Can they execute it? Like the Jets, they clearly have a plan. It's good, but I think it's just about what's at the crux of the plan. They drafted 2 edge rushers. They traded a future first round pick to make sure that they got 2 of them this year. So clearly they're committed to it. And if they hit on both of them, more power to them. Maybe they become that pass rushing unit that creates more turnovers, wins on third downs more often. But if they don't, that future first they gave up could hurt a lot more. So we could see. But again, it's about teams trying to find what's the thing that's going to make you competitive again. What's the aspect of your game that's going to make you a contender for the Super Bowl? And for a lot of teams for many years, it's just been the quarterback. But teams are starting to realize you can't just bank on just the quarterback. You got to have a run game. You got to have a pass rush. You got to have a run stuff and defense. You got to have other playmakers. You got to have a different kind. You got to have teams that do multiple, that have those different things there, as they're saying. So that's part of what I think that these teams are trying to do. We'll see if the Falcons are right. And that's the beautiful thing about the draft. We can all give them all our grades and say this, that, and a third. It won't matter until about 3-4 years from now when we see how these draft picks have panned out in the NFL and whether or not these teams are looking to resign them. Like, for example, if you looked at the Steelers draft class after 2022, when they drafted Kenny Pickett and George Pickens, it looked like they did an awesome job. Kenny Pickett, helped them get back to a winning record at the end of the season, had several fourth quarter comebacks. George Pickens was looking like a rookie phenom. Here, not even 4 years later, they're both gone. And so now that draft class looks terrible. So it's just about how things pan out.
No doubt about it. I'll tell you what, you want to know how things pan out? Check out Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, because they'll give you a hint. They know these rosters, man. It's 90 people that's going to show up at training camp. They know every one of them from every single team. It's amazing that they do that, but they'll be able to break it down for you on Locked On NFL Scouting, and it'll help you not have to jump through too many mental gymnastics trying to figure out who all of these guys are. All right, Chris Carter is going to go attack the world in Pittsburgh. Chris, you getting honored. You got a haircut, man. You getting honored, right? I gotta at least let them know that people in Pittsburgh, they taking care of you up there, right?
We getting honored in a 40 under 40 list. It's my second 40 under 40 in the past several months, so appreciate the shout out there. But Pittsburgh Courier 40 under 40, your boy gets a little bit of recognition around here, so it's very nice.
No doubt about it, man. You look the part, and personally, I think you are the part too. You're one of my favorite 40 under 40 people. All right, man. Make sure y'all check out Locked On NFL Scouting, Locked On NFL each and every day, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Jaguars. We'll see you. Thank you for spending 32 minutes with us today, and y'all take care.